Hi there, James.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, could you turn the video off because it's not great for sound.
Yeah, can do.
Thank you. Lovely. Welcome to the show. Yes, so we're going out across America, and we're going to be talking about the Knights of Templar and the Holy Grail. And James Martin, is an expert in the field and has a radio show about the Knights of Templar. And we connected through a friend, didn't we? Erica Gregory.
Yeah, Erica Gregory. I've known Erica for quite a long time now. We've got involved in all sorts of things, from paranormal investigations to discussions around history, visiting many sites, yes.
Oh, excellent. So why I wanted to speak to you and why I got interested in this, obviously, I've heard of it before, everybody's heard of it before, and watched a movie. Um, actually, I haven't seen the movie, but I know a lot of people have the Dan Brown movie. It was a friend of mine who, I'm a psychic and a medium, and it was a friend of mine who asked me to speak to a friend of hers who was a bit lost in life. And so I had a chat with him, and I said, did he want to shamanically journey with me? So we journeyed together, and I saw, as we were entering the portal of traveling into the astral plane, I saw on his right hand side some soldiers who I asked them who they were. They said they were the Knights of Templar. Then I journeyed with him up to the higher dimensions. I took him up to the seventh dimension. I examined his chakras, etc. And there was so much imagery there about a chalice and blood and this kind of thing, and drinking blood, which I didn't really understand, and then some kind of mention of the Grail, which again I didn't understand. And I thought, well, that's interesting. So I wanted to speak to him about it and see, since we journeyed together, what images he had seen. He had seen nothing. But what I found really interesting is when we were walking out, when I took him down back to this dimension, and we were walking out through the portal, which I use when I journey. I use two oak trees. Just as we were coming through the forest and heading for the oak trees, I saw suddenly a little baby lamb. And normally, in the forest, that's where people's power animals gather. So I assumed that it was his power animal, which is strange for a power animal, a little lamb. And so I peered at it closer, and the closer I got, the more I was moved emotionally until I started sobbing uncontrollably. And it was strange. This lamb had a weird power, like it was a weird strength, and yet it was soft, and it just went right through me, and I was just sobbing uncontrollably. And I just felt all my sin at once. I would say I wasn't a sinful person, good, but it's like I felt it all at once, that I was like just completely sin. And this lamb was exuding just this, it's indescribable. It was so soft and yet so strong. And so I googled lamb, strength, God, Jesus, and it came up with all these, like Pascal Lamb, which I didn't really know what that was. And then suddenly I came across it. It was a little medallion for sale on eBay. It was just the image of it, and it had a lamb, and it had Knights of Templar, that was their insignia. And I was so curious about the whole thing, about what the lamb is, about what it means, about what they are. And so over to you, Jay.
Well, there's a lot to digest there, but certainly a lot of the icons and a lot of the symbology that you've you've just referenced. Anyone who's listening to this and knows a little bit about the Knights Templar shouldn't be too unfamiliar with the proposed connections between the Knights Templar and the Holy Grail, various bloodlines, lambs, etc. So I think just a brief explanation as to who the Knights Templar were, where they get their name, just to put things into context. So the Knights Templar, they get their name due to the fact that they were donated a stable in Jerusalem, and that stable was a part, allegedly, of the Temple of Solomon, and hence the reason that the Knights Templar's full name is the Poor Knights of Christ of the Temple of Solomon in Jerusalem, and we shorten that down to Knights Templar. Now, their founding's interesting. There's a lot of debate about who founded the Templars and when. Was it in 1118, 1096? That's up for debate and discussion. But 9 or 7 or 11 elderly men, by the standards of the time, went over to the Holy Land during the Crusades and started to dig. And what they found, we don't know, but we do know that they hurried back to the Pope, who then granted them quite a lot of power. They became reportable only to the Pope and became essentially Europe's first monks in arms. Now, they amassed a very large amount of money during their time. They became the bankers of Europe. Lots of cash from kings, dukes, earls, counts, your local lord. The Templars were everywhere. If you could see a map of Templar sites, their commanderies, their preceptories, etc., even their farm lands, you would find that Europe would be covered in red. It would be covered in Templar sites. They were everywhere, and developed really the Europe's first banking system. Travelers' checks. You donate some gold in Temple Sowerby, and you can then go and collect it over in Jerusalem when you get there. They were incredibly wealthy, and this led to a number of issues with a few kings. For example, Philip IV of France, or Philip le Bel, who, for very interesting reasons, owed a lot of money to the Templars, and he thought, good idea, let's wipe them all out, and sent secret instructions on Friday the 13th of October 1307 to arrest and execute the entire order. Curiously though, it's almost as if they were tipped off. All of the gold, treasure, artifacts were nowhere to be seen. Where did they go? One of the animals that was very important to the Templars was, of course, the sheep, and it is believed that where I'm broadcasting from, which is up on the Scottish border at Carlisle, we have a lot of Herdwick sheep around here, and it's believed that the Templars introduced that sheep from the Shiraz region of Iran into Cumbria. The sheep was very important for them because not only did it provide food, limited amount of food, but it provided the clothing, provided the wool for clothing that was incredibly important during their time. It's still important for us today. currently wearing a woolly jumper. With the Templars, though, there's also a religious notion behind the Lamb. You have what's known as Agnus Dei, the Lamb of God, and this for the Templars was not just the importance of sheep. And for those who are wanting to read a book about sheep, I can just assure you I've read one. I don't need to read anything else. I've had enough of sheep, but I would recommend reading Alan Butler. And if you were to type in Google Alan Butler, and then it's called Agnus Dei, you'll be able to find out more about the connection between the Templars and sheep. But yeah, for them it was very important. There's religious iconography to do with Easter. There's also pagan ideas to do with sacrifice of particular animals that have bled into Christianity. You mentioned something around the blood and perhaps some chalice. Well, there is a series of families across Europe who have protected over time sacred knowledge, gnosis, in a very esoteric idea. They're known as the Rex Deus Families. And it's believed by some that the Rex Deus Families have a bloodline that goes all the way back to Jesus the Nazarene and the House of David. And prior to that, into the pharaonic houses of ancient Egypt. And that this bloodline needs to be protected from forces that perhaps are not too keen on the idea that Jesus may not have been divine, but instead a man, just like us today, but with a divine message. And certainly, a lot of the symbology that you've seen has very deep, entrenched Rex Deus and Templar connections. I would just, again, if for anyone who's wanting to read more about Rex Deus, I can wholeheartedly recommend Dr. Tim Wallace Murphy's Rex Deus. It's plainly called that. An absolute must read if you are wanting to find more about the hidden notions of the Rex Deus families.
So where are they now, these people?
Well, who knows? They may very well have integrated into society. There may very well be people amongst us that don't know that they're Rex Deus. Certainly, if you have a look back in time, you can see some very unusual symbolic artwork. I mean, you have to bear in mind the idea that Jesus wasn't divine, and not just that, but perhaps was in fact married and had 2 children, James and Sarah, was heresy. And so across medieval Europe, these ideas were often expressed in symbols with hidden meanings, in artwork, in fact even in the carved entranceways and portals of some cathedrals. For example, outside the east and western portal of the Cathedral Church of Chartres in northern France, you'll see some very interesting symbology. Again, you have in the Da Vinci Code in the part of the world that I usually live, which is in the south of France. You have a town called Rennes-le-Château, which became very famous due to its priest and the alleged connections with the Rex Deus families. Now, that village, for those who are familiar with it, the story's fun, but if you do want to go on a pilgrimage to look at these families, to investigate more around the Grail, can I wholeheartedly recommend booking a flight down to Carcassonne, which is Disneyland for adults, and go and explore the area. Rennes-le-Château has become famous because of the Da Vinci Code, and as I say, it's priest, but the area around it is littered with symbology, with hidden stories around the Rex Deus Families. Well worth a visit. In Britain, you can visit some very interesting places too. Rosslyn Chapel, I was there just this weekend doing a tour, and Rosslyn Chapel, littered with interesting symbology, including, in fact, American crops littered all over the inside of the church, which is astonishing for a church that was built around 100 years before, around about 75 years before Columbus.
Where is Rosslyn? Is Scotland, Glasgow? Or?
Yeah, it's around about 8 miles south of Edinburgh.
Oh, it's
Um,
over there.
Very easy to get to.
Interesting.
But again, you've got the village of Ballintradock, which is now called Temple, just 2 miles away from Roslin itself. Again, just highlighting that the Templars were, in fact, everywhere. You were talking about drinking blood. It's funny you mentioned this because I was also doing a tour of a Mithraeum, and there is a notion of some of the darker sides of the esoteric world involving some pretty nasty notions of blood drinking, terrifying animals and, in fact, humans within an inch of their life to then drink all of the adrenaline littered in the bloodstream. Whilst there is a notion of that in some of the darker aspects of this, certainly in the more enlightened thing, you can translate the idea of drinking blood, in fact, of the bloodline that we speak of, this idea that Jesus had children and they went on to, some of them ended up with their descendants becoming kings. Charlemagne is sometimes suggested to be a descendant of Jesus, the Merovingians before them. No, I'm not saying that I necessarily agree with any of that. I'm just saying that these are the stories, and there are some interesting bits of evidence that might lean in that direction. But this is a very personal journey for those who are wanting to investigate the nature of what Jesus is. Was he a man? Was he divine? It's a very personal journey. It's an interesting one to. It's a very interesting one to undertake. The notion of spirituality, looking after one another is most certainly what those who go on a quest for the Grail end up on. The Grail isn't a chalice, but instead is that hidden wisdom, is the notion of the notion of gnosis, of that hidden wisdom. That's perhaps why so many people get disappointed when they buy a metal detector and start scanning the hills and find little.
They said the Cathars had the Grail, didn't they?
Yes, there was an idea that the Cathars had some sort of treasure. Now, the problem with that is the Cathars lived really on donation. So I'll just explain the Cathars. They had a belief system, very ancient. The Catholic Church described them as a heresy, and that heresy had to be stamped out. And what came after this was an invasion of northern France into the south of France and the occupation thereafter. The south of France was a myriad of small independent counties with different loyalties to the kings of Aragon, the counts of Barcelona, the king of France in some instances, but it was independent and had been since the Emperor Charlemagne and one of his lieutenants, Guillaume of Gellone, the first William of Orange, set up some independent states against what was then the Moorish occupation of the Iberian Peninsula. The Cathars are around in the 12th century, and there was a crusade against them. Their belief system had been around since the Roman times, essentially an offshoot of Manichaeism, the followers of Mani. And the Cathars believed that there was a heaven and hell, but we live in hell. We can only go upwards to heaven. They believed in equality of the sexes. They had a very strict set of beliefs in terms of becoming their version of a priest, or parfait, as the Catholics later called them mockingly. For them, they were called the bon homme and the bonne femme, the good man and the good woman. And their belief system, they were very early vegetarians. They didn't believe in eating anything that could reproduce. They don't believe in reproduction. They thought, why should you bring anything into hell? Doesn't make any sense to them. And they lived on charity from donations by local lords, counts, and because of the nature of their beliefs, their belief system came from the east, perhaps as far as India, and travelled down the trade routes of the Silk Road into Europe. The Cathars weren't just based in the south of France, they were all over Europe. In fact, the largest concentration, you'd have found them in Belgium. So how do we explain then this invasion of the north and the south? Well, very simply, a power grab. The Catholic Church was in quite a bit of bother. Earlier in the 10th, 9th, 8th centuries, Europe was re-paganizing. The Norse had invaded large swathes of northern Britain. Kings in the south of England were pagan, with, yes, some Christians. But across France, the north of France had been subject to frequent raids by, again, the Norse. There was splits with the Eastern Church, huge schisms, and it didn't look like the church was going to survive for too long. Well, we skip ahead to the 12th century, and what do we find but one big power grab, an invasion. And if you read more about the Cathars and what the leader of that crusade, a man called Simon de Montfort, Simon de Montfort, the fifth Simon de Montfort, and he was the Earl of Leicester. He blinded people. He set fire to entire towns and cities. In fact, one notable act of atrocity was down at the city of Béziers, where he ordered the entire city to be burned. When asked, but we will be burning some of our own Catholics, he responded by saying, well, God will know his own. Truly horrible. But this notion of the Grail, it's unlikely that the Cathars had any treasures or anything like this. just simply because they had donations and were being persecuted left, right, and centre. Eventually, there is another interesting idea though, which we have to go a little earlier to explore. The south of France was a very tolerant and still is the Pyrenean side of France, very welcoming, tolerant of lots of ideas even to this day. And that was certainly true in the medieval period. The largest Jewish population outside of the Middle East was found on the south coast of France. And people got on. There was, in the area of Rennes-le-Château, lots of trade, prosperity. The Roman Empire collapsed in the west towards the middle of the 5th century. The famous sacking of Rome by one Alaric the Goth saw him plunder the treasury in Rome, taking perhaps even the menorah from the Romans' own sacking of Jerusalem during an uprising against the empire. Later saw Vespasian become the emperor. All of that plunder from the Romans, it must have gone somewhere. And there were lots of rumours that, in fact, the treasures ended up in the vicinity of Rennes-le-Château in the south of France. Now, it's possible, if that is true, that the Cathars and the Templars perhaps even discovered some of those treasures. There is a very strong belief in the south of France that Jesus and Mary, the heavily pregnant Mary Magdalene, arrived and settled. If that story turns out in fact to be true, it would make sense if Mary has been exiled or feels exiled from the Middle East. Then again, as I said before, the largest Jewish population was out in the south of France. It would be the destination I'd choose personally. And we've just got to remember the following as well. Jesus was a rabbi, and in order to be a rabbi, you must have children and be married. So none of this is heretical. It's just stating the facts. Did Jesus end up in the south of France? Did he set up a bloodline? Well, again, that's for people to decide. Part of answering that and that quest comes with that spiritual pathway I spoke about earlier. I'm sure if listeners are hoping that I can tell you where the Grail is, unfortunately, I'm going to leave you disappointed.
Thank you for that. Did you what do you think they use the? I mean, I'm just wondering from a paranormal point of view, what was the feeling when I saw the lamb? I mean, I know I went to the church I go to over in Hayes, and there was a picture of the lamb bleeding into a chalice. Is the lamb symbolic of Jesus?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of animals that are used from the pagan period into the Christian period, and yes, essentially, what you've got, the Paschal Lamb, or as I say, Agnus Dei, usually does represent the notion of birth then into adulthood in this way. There's references. Please don't ask me whereabouts in the Bible, but there are references. I think it's in the Gospel of John. Where it is, I'm not too sure. But the reference I'm referring to is where John the Baptist sees Jesus and says along the lines of "Behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world." So it's again, the Lamb of God is another servant of God, if that makes sense. And you have lots of depictions of, lion-like lambs, things like this, in the book of Revelation.
Oh,
But
right.
yes,
What does that say?
well, there's about 30 or 40 references in the book of Revelation. The only part of the Bible I've actually read, if you must know. But the first appearance is whereby the seven spirits of God that appear in Revelations, usually associated with Jesus, and often associated with seven stars. Without getting into too much, but or skipping ahead from the question, please keep in the back of your minds the term seven stars. There is an association with the Lamb of God, one of the spirits of God, one of the seven spirits of God. But seven stars, it's a number that comes up quite a lot with the Templars. In fact, it comes up in modern Freemasonry also. The seven stars are often referred to as the Pleiades. Again, the number of people who are a lot more into the paranormal world than I am have referred to the Pleiades in terms of UFOs. Have seen seven stars when they've been doing readings, for example. They've seen them in dreams. The ancient Egyptians, curiously, depicted the Pleiades as a series of blue stars, and we now know, using today's technology, that that's exactly what they are. Just keep that in the back of your head. Back to Revelations, there is a reference in there that the Lamb itself was said to have had 12 apostles also, and that the Lamb submits to the will of the Father or of God and is then slain, but is then trusted with the judgment of mankind. There's a lot of references. It's animistic link, really. It's very similar to the story of Jesus, and you find the notion of the Lamb not just in Christian symbology, but really around the world too. It's certainly an important part of Jewish traditions, and you even find the honor of lambs over in some of the Eastern religions also. Essentially, with that in mind, and there's lots of other areas in which the Lamb of God is referenced, the Lamb appears upon the seal of the Grand Master of the Knights Templar. Usually the symbols that you would associate with Templars would be two poor knights on the back of one horse. The notion being we live in poverty, which is why we have one horse for two people. The Templars were a very wealthy organisation, but certainly in terms of symbology, they were meant to be poor. The Lamb, in terms of the Templars, you've got, in fact, it wasn't just the Grand Master of the Templars. There was also the Masters of the Temple in England that used the Lamb of God. So there's Amory de Saint-Maur, Robert of Sandford, Richard of Hastings, William de la More, all had on their personal signets the Lamb of God. Again, the notion of this relationship between the Lamb being representative of the story of Christ, of poverty, but also then of the importance of lamb in the physical world, and the story then of the golden fleece are all aspects of Templar symbology around the lamb.
Hmm.
If that answers
Thank
that.
you. What do you think? Why did I feel such love coming off that, and such awareness of my own sin? It was almost like it was feeling God or Jesus or something. It was really overwhelming. I cried so much, just couldn't speak.
Well, that's the notion. It's certainly not the first person who has. If I ever do a tour or do some site visits to Templar places or churches, cathedrals, usually it's the lamb that's spotted first. And I have witnessed people get very emotional whilst looking at the lamb. Remember what I said before, Agnus Dei is there to cleanse us of sin. That's the notion. In other words, to wipe the slate clean, to know that, in Christian um, theology, that, this is wiping the sin clean so that you might be healed by God's hand, him or herself. And that's the notion behind that. So I think with you, it's there's lots of things. I mean, one of the things that struck me was, do you recall there being any music? This is certainly something that crops up when people have these visions of the land. Was there any music associated?
No, it was just a overwhelming feeling. As I got closer and closer to it, because I thought I was just a lamb, and as I got closer and closer, it just kind of crept over me, that awareness of my sin, and yeah, maybe a feeling of being healed or having it taken away, and a lot of like love, but weird love, like a mixture of softness and yet strong, like a love I've never experienced ever. Maybe people have if they've had good parents. I mean, my life's been a bit harsh, but yeah, it was like, and it was like being healed. Yeah, it was.
I think that when we talk about sins, again, it's a very personal thing, and if you want to look at it in terms of messages, um, we we carry the burden of sin, of guilt, of shame, or whatever it is that you want to use, and to have that removed leaves a very large chasm. It lifts a burden. Um, Now, if you've had something like that removed and replaced then with something very healing, then of course it's overpowering.
Mm.
Um, and yes, I heard many people who've had very similar experiences. You know,
Really? And is it only the as regards to the lamb's link with a Templar, or the lamb in a whole?
well, the lamb crops up in a lot of symbols, not just the Templars. I mean, for example, the Cathedral Church of Hart, a very interesting place. The Most people, if they go there for the first time, will have what I call the Hart experience. It's not immediate. It could be days, weeks, or even a month later. But you'll know that it's the experience because the stained glass in the church is known as Hart blue. It gives off a slight UV property. We do not have the technology today to replicate it, and we know roughly when it was lost also. People who've been to Sharp for the first time have then experienced very lucid, very vivid dreams days, weeks later. Some of which have involved well, I'm not going to mention any names, but someone who's very close to me had a experience of being in a field which surrounded by lambs
Wow.
and could talk to them.
Wow.
He knew that they understood what he was saying, but couldn't reply. And I said, "Well, that's interesting, isn't it?" This person's a vicar in the southwest of England, and I said, "It's interesting that because perhaps if there was communication with the divine, what and whoever your God is." Maybe it wasn't to communicate with you directly. Maybe the notion was the feeling of being with these lambs. And
Oh, that's interesting. Thank you.
that was the short experience for him. He said he was bathed in the blue light of the stained glass, and he knew I'd warned him, of what happens.
Well,
But yeah,
that's and where is this? When are you going next, so I can come?
I'll be in Charter later this year. Should be around June time. Chart is spelled Chartres. It's a very old, very ancient cathedral. Was a site of pagan Celtic worship long before the church was established. It is rumoured that there is the convergence of 7 rivers beneath the cathedral. When you walk into the cathedral, you'll notice that there's a labyrinth which you're meant to walk. There's certain symbology within that cathedral that might give some people an idea as to where things like the Ark of the Covenant might be, or where things like Grails and other such secrets. But the Eastern, what's known as the Portal of the Initiates, tells a very intriguing story. In fact, it's that intriguing. I'm stunned whenever I arrive that they were allowed to carve with such detail what they did. It lies on a Camino route to Santiago de Compostela, but also on a reverse route known as the route of the pilgrimage route of the alchemist, or of the philosopher, and that route ends up, oddly enough, at the Church of Roslin, as I've mentioned before. It's certainly a very interesting place and well worth the visit if you haven't been. It's around about 80 miles southwest of Paris, so it's not too far away.
Hmm. Yes, it's so fascinating. So yeah, but just to ask you, the Knights Templar was clearly linked with the French guy, I'd say, rather than me. Do you think the lamb I saw was linked with me or linked with him? Oh, actually, it was probably me because I had the feeling he didn't see
Well,
it.
it's interesting. You just said this person was French.
Hmm.
Well, just curiously, of course, the downfall of the Templars was quite a horrific event that occurred in France. Um, the King Philip IV ordered secret orders to be distributed on Friday the 13th of October 1307 that instructed the arrest and then later the burning alive and execution of the Templars. It is believed that the reason we say today that Friday the 13th is unlucky is because of what that king did to the Templars. It's certainly in terms of what you've described, it makes sense that that message was for someone who was French. I just want to just check something because there is also some notion between Agnus Dei and Joan of Arc,
Right.
who is the patron saint, effectively, of France. There's certainly some connections there. But I wonder whether or not for you it's more of a case of helping to lift a blockage. You know, perhaps if there's um, certain psychics or mediums that I speak to, sometimes feel like they're spiritually blocked, or just finding it very difficult to access particular things as clear as they used to. I refer to it sometimes as retuning the radio.
Yes, I do have a blocks. Yeah, come up. Yeah.
And I just wonder whether, if you feel that there was warmth, love, and the sort of lifting of something like that, that
Yes.
could be what's happened. That could be the retuning of the radio.
Oh, I see. So that was really something for me.
Hmm.
How do I get in contact with that again? I mean, I printed off a picture of a lamb. And then I went to the church. I saw a lamb being cut, well, in the stained glass window and poured into a chalice. That moved me. How do I connect with that again? What did the vicar do?
It's not I say this to many people. It's these things happen um, because the universe is unfolding as it should. However, one of the methods that might be used takes some time. There is a non-religious personal prayer that I use each day, which is known as the Prayer of Abandonment. Um, I tend to chant it or read it to myself, but it's by someone called Charles de Foucauld. But if you type in Prayer of Abandonment on Google or something like that, you should be able to find it. In fact, if you'd like, I can send over a recording by a Sufi master um, who's recently passed. But yes, I can send a recording over to you. That usually and can help resolve any lingering questions. But I'd just say this. Sometimes these events are meant to happen only once. Maybe it's the start of a quest for you.
Hmm.
And perhaps as you go along that particular journey, there might be other experiences.
Hmm.
But the prayer of abandonment is most certainly something I would recommend for this.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'll listen to that straight away. I'll let you go now. I just looked at the time, Jay, and I saw it's near the school run, and I need to bomb out in the car, to pick my son up. Thank you. That's been awesome. Really enlightened. Awesome. Thank you. Can you recommend any books to? You recommended one, the Rex Deus. Any others?
Yeah, anything. There's Tim Willis Murphy also produced Hidden Wisdom. That looks at some of the esoteric side of what we've been talking about. As I say, Alan Butler, who wrote the book on sheep, as much as it might sound daft, it certainly is. It does come with my recommendation. Anything by Tim Willis Murphy is good. I would perhaps even suggest Court Lindole. And well, of course, it goes without saying, for those who are wanting to listen to every Friday, I'm on Night Vision in the US with Renee Barnett, often discussing things like this. If you want to listen in, feel free to do so.
Oh, that's excellent. And of course, people can find you on Facebook. We should post some links in the description and where people can find your show. And obviously, if they want to talk to you on Facebook.
Yeah, absolutely. More than happy for that.
And do you do the tours? So you're going in June. Is that the people meet you there, or what happens?
Yeah, usually it's a case of if people I don't remember the way to work before is people have messaged me and we've arranged something. In terms of formal tours, my partner in crime, Renee Barnett, is currently looking at establishing formal tours, but obviously with the global pandemic and the situation we find ourselves in, those plans are paused. But no, drop a message. Usually, if you get to the area, sort yourself out, then I can come and travel or take people around, do whatever. South of France, Roslyn, pretty much anywhere.
Thank you. Is there lots of little B&Bs you can stay in that part of France?
Oh, plenty. Yeah, B&Bs, hotels, you name it.
Oh, excellent. I want to go. So want to go. Oh, fantastic. Well, you've been great, and thank you very much. And I'm sure the listeners enjoyed themselves. And thank you for guesting.
More than welcome. Take care, everyone. Thanks
Thank,
for having me.
thank you very much, Jay. And thank you all for listening, and see you next week.